We sing that song, Ancient Words. And those ancient words, they teach us that we serve an awesome God, don't they? That we serve a God who loves, who is compassionate, who is giving. It's pretty awesome, right? Those ancient words teach us that, correct? They teach us that He's always listening, He's always patient. That patience gives Him the ability, not that in our minds, I'm going to say it this way because I don't want to be misunderstood. In our minds, that patience that He has for us gives Him the ability to be slow to anger. Okay? The Scripture tells us that. Those ancient words, they tell us that He's slow to anger. But we forget that He does anger. That He can get angry. It just takes Him a while. Most of us, we have a short fuse. Once that thing's lit, we go off. Some of us a little bit longer than others. But God, He's got a fuse that's miles long. We are intent. We are incontent and want to light that fuse for Him for some reason. But we forget about it because ever since we were little kids, we've been taught God is loving, God is caring, God is giving. He does all of this for us. He loves us. Yes, that is 100% true, and we stand on those promises, but we forget the warnings. We stand on the promises of God loving us, and we forget the warnings that we can anger God. We never worry about it. Hebrews 4, verses 1 through 3 says, God's promises are... Start that again. God's promises of entering His rest stands. So we ought to be trembling with fear that some of you might not or might fail to experience it. I'm going to read that again. God's promises of entering His rest still stands. So we ought to tremble with fear that some of you might fail to experience it. It goes on to say, for this good news, that God has prepared this rest has been announced to us just as it was to them. But it did them no good because they didn't share the faith of those who listened to God. For only we who believe can enter His rest. I'm going to stop and explain that real quick. Them, in this passage, is referring to the Israelites who were freed from Egypt. That's who them is referring to. And the rest that is mentioned is not just any rest. It's the eternal rest. It's the rest that was meant to happen in the garden, that we get to spend eternity with God in that fellowship. That's the rest that's being talked about here. So them being the Israelites who angered God. In verse 3, I'm going to start verse 3 again and read it again. For only we who believe can enter His rest. As for the others, God said this, in my anger I took an oath. They will never enter my place of rest. In His anger, these are God's words, in my anger I took an oath. And they will never reach the place of rest. He was talking about the Israelites that He freed from Egypt. The slaves that He freed and sent to the Promised Land. Do you know how many of those Israelites, the adults, not the children, I'm going to preface this, the adults that made it to the Promised Land, do you know how many of them there were when they left? Thousands. Do you know how many actually entered the Promised Land? Nope. 2. 2 of the original adults that left Egypt. Only 2 entered the Promised Land. Caleb and Joshua. They were the only 2 that kept the faith the whole time they walked through the desert and the wilderness. They're the only two adults that stayed true to God's word. Even Moses didn't make it. Because Moses got angry. He got angry because God didn't answer quick enough. So instead of touching the rock like he was supposed to, he smacked it. He lost his temper. But it took God a long time to lose his temper with the Israelites. As they were walking through the wilderness, and he delivered them the promised land once. And he says, go in and scout. See what you're up against. Moses sent in a group of guys. They went in there. They were spies. They're scouting. Sent 12 in. 10 came back and said, well, we can't go in there. There's giants. We can't go in there. They'll kill us. 2 said, well, God will deliver us. He sent us here. He told us to go. 2 of them come back and said, with God's help, we'll do this. Because everyone listened to the 10 that said no, they got to go around the desert and keep going around. God says, I'll wait you out. You don't want to have faith in me? I'll wait you out. Because you will not enter. You have no faith in me. The 2 that said, yeah, we can do this with God, they did it with God. We read through Joshua and the judges and all that. We read about the stories of what happened at that point when they did make it in. But the Israelites, they were open and honest about what they had to say. They didn't trust God. At one point, they wanted to turn around and go back to Egypt because they understood that they were afraid of the unknown in the Promised Land. They were afraid of what might happen to them. But they were comfortable going back to slavery because they knew what to expect. They had no trust. And to be honest, they had no fear of God. They saw everything that He did, but they had no fear of Him. It says that we should have a fear. Think about that. As children, we fear our parents, do we not? Most of the time. Most kids, we have a healthy fear for our parents. Oh, Dad's going to find out. He's going to kill me. Or Mom finds out I'm not going to sit for a month. That's a healthy fear. But they spoke out against Moses. They grumbled under their breath about him. They grumbled under their breath about God, thinking that it's all hidden. But God could see their hearts. He could see Joshua and Caleb's heart. They never faltered. They never failed. They stayed true to Him. And He allowed them into the Promised Land. Same as He could see into everything that we are seeing and thinking and doing. We forget this. We live in a society at a time that feels that the saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We live by that. What happens in my home, what happens in my mind stays in my mind. No one else needs to know about it. God knows about it. But we think we can hide those things. We think we can get away with them because if no one knows about it, no one sees it, no one hears it, no one can call me out on it, and I'm not accountable to anyone. Wrong. You skip down to verse 13 in Hebrews, it says, nothing in all creation is hidden from God. Everything is naked and exposed before His eyes, and He is the one whom you are accountable. Nothing is hidden from Him. Like I said, we hide things all the time. We hide it from our family, our friends, our loved ones. We even try to hide things from ourselves. Think about that for a second, because it's true. When we screw something up, when we mess up, we try to push it so far down in our own subconscious that we forget about it. As I said, we think if no one else knows about it, we're good. But God knows. He sees all things. It says right here, everything in creation is exposed to Him. We're a raw nerve to Him. He sees it all, feels it all, knows it all. He created it. But we think we can hide things from Him. We think we're safe because we stand on the promise that God loves us. Yes, He loves us. That's why He sent Christ to save us. But He also said, follow me. Do as I do. But we are content to stay hypocritical. We will preach the gospel, but we won't live it. We will share the Scripture, but we don't know it. We have no fear of God. I don't say that as a blanket statement. Yes, there are those that are truly following who God is and what He's told us to be. But for a mass majority, we are hypocrites. He knows if you said something and didn't mean it. He knows if you asked Him into His heart, but did it because someone else was standing right there and you wanted to impress them. He knows if you've asked for baptism or asked to be part of something more and didn't mean it. He knows that. We might not know that, but He does. Because He knows the very inner workings of your heart. He knows if you're putting on a show. But we don't fear it. Because for some of us, yeah, God created everything, yeah, He's good. We say it, we go through the motions. You talk to a lot of faithful people. They went through the motions for a long time. There's a lot of people that just go through the motions because that's what everyone else is doing. That's how, maybe if I do this long enough, it'll hit me. Maybe if I do it long enough, I'll understand why they get so excited about stuff. It's not the way it works. It has to be internal. So when we do that type of stuff, when we have this external show, I'm not going to fear. I fear God. Because I know my mistakes, if I continue to make them, continually, blatantly make the mistakes, continually disregard the warnings that God has given me, He can hand out a curse just as easy as a lesson. I'm hoping I never make Him that angry. Those of you that were here last year, right after camp, heard me say that I've actually heard God yell at me. Clearly. And it was the scariest thing I ever felt. While we were at camp last year, none of us as leaders prayed about camp. None of us prayed about anything that was going to happen that week. None of us went to God and said, what do you want us to do? None of us. 2 days in, camp was virtually over. Nobody was having a good time. Nobody was listening to God. Nobody. From us as deans and as leaders of the camp, we weren't listening. Our staff wasn't listening. And the students weren't listening. Finally, a couple of us sat down and we just started praying. Because there was something that was said as, where the heart of the leaders are, so goes the church. Or so goes the staff, or however you want to put that. It got me thinking, so I grabbed our staff and we started praying. And we were about ready to just call it quits and just, all right, we're just going to try to salvage what we have and just have a good time the rest of the week. We're not going to even try to get into scriptures because we're not even there. Mentally, spiritually, we're not there. And at one point in the night, we went in to just do a little worship before bed, and I heard clear as day, "Get out of my way. You have angered me." Wasn't that nice? I'm crying now just thinking about the fear that went through me. I wasn't afraid of God being angry at me, of doing something that would anger Him because, well, God's a loving God. I know what the Scripture says, but I wasn't paying attention to it because I've always been taught God loves us, God will do for us, God will give us, so long as we believe. Well, I believed, but I wasn't following, so He wasn't going to bless me. He wanted to kick me in the teeth. I angered Him enough that He wanted to hurt me. Wanted to punish me like a father. And that's exactly the fear that went through me. Because I remember my dad yelling at me as a child. I was probably Georgie's age. And my dad coming, he's standing over me and screaming and foaming and spitting at me. I don't even remember what I did.
Very bad.
No, I remember exactly what I did. I spit my food out. He chased me down through the yard. But that was the same fear I had. I knew my dad loved me. I knew it, but I was terrified that I had upset him for one. That I had completely angered him enough that he chased me down through the yard. And that was the same feeling I had in my heart when I heard God say, "Move. You're not listening." It terrified me. And that's what really got me with the very first verse where it says, "It should make us tremble in fear." Because we will get to see the promised land. We will get to stand before our God. Every single one of us, every person in the world will get to stand in front of God and see the promised land. But only some of us will hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Welcome." And we'll be standing right next to someone that's standing that we thought was there with us, standing right beside us. "Away from me, I never knew you." Because yes, they called out, they did miracles in God's name, they did this, they did that, but they never truly believed in what they were doing. How many hypocrites do we know? We should have a healthy fear of our God. That fear is respect. And yes, there is a terrified fear, and there's a fear that equals respect. And unfortunately, a lot of people today don't know the difference. They don't understand it. We should respect God and His wishes. We should have a healthy fear. Because yes, our Lord loves us. He sent His Son to die for us, to take on the punishment that is rightfully ours. He showed more love than we ever could. But because we know that good news, we forget that He's still able to punish. As I try to explain to a lot of people, yes, because this comes up a lot, was, well, what about those that don't believe? Isn't He going to punish them? Yes, but that's different. They've never heard. I'm sorry. Those that don't believe, who have heard, are going to be punished. Those who have never heard, it's a gray area. Period. It's a gray area. Because they don't know the gospel. They don't know the good news of who Jesus is. They don't know who God is. They've never been taught. So it's a gray area. But those who have been told are no longer ignorant to the facts. Whether they choose to believe them or not, they're not ignorant. They know them now. It's their choice. But those who make the choice to follow God and only follow Him part way, look at the Israelites. They followed Him out of Egypt. They went, they started marching across the wilderness. They got to paradise. And He said, enter. And they're like, whoa, we don't want to go there. Because there's people that are going to hurt us. When they got to that point, they turned away from following Him and followed themselves. We do the same thing when we say, yes, we want to follow God. We want to give our lives to Christ. We want to walk that path. And then we start doing our own thing again. So I'm giving you the warning. I'm repeating the warning. Have a fear. Remember that He can be angry. It takes a while. And don't bank on, I can push Him to this point and say, all right, I'm sorry, Lord, I'm good. Don't do that. Because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. Walk in His footsteps every day. Have a healthy fear of who He is. And like any good father, He loves you no matter what. But He will lay down a punishment, a correction. And it's not as nice as just stealing a cell phone for a week. It's usually a lot more painful. So as we close here today, I want you to think about where He's leading you, what He's trying to teach you. I want you to understand that He's looking out for your best interests, whether we like it or not. That's what He's doing. If He tells you to move, move. So He told the Israelites to move and they said no. And they got to wander for 40 years and never get to enter. Some of us are in that holding pattern, that 40-year walk. There's a way out of it. It's to repent. And what that means, because I know it's a church-anese word, is to turn around and walk away from the sin. To give it up. I don't know how many times Jesus says it. Repent. Sin no more. Think about that as we pray. Father, we come to you this morning and I thank you for allowing us to be here. For bringing us together as a family, as one unit, a unit unified for you. So Lord, I ask that you speak into our hearts, that you give us that understanding, that unity, that trust that you've been trying to pour out to us. Let us accept that. Let us walk with you. Let us learn to walk with a healthy fear, a healthy respect for who you are and what you've done. Let us not forget that you can be angered. Let us not walk in that dangerous position of thinking nothing can touch us because we said we believe. Because when we start thinking that we are infallible and that we start thinking that we can do no wrong, that's when we start to wrong. So let us stand with you. Let us be healthy and stand with you. Guide us. Keep us on the path that you've called us to be on. Let us walk with honor and integrity and glorify your name. Amen.